The Toronto Maple Leafs play a hockey game tomorrow is something I can't really say for another 80 days. But if the Leafs did play tomorrow, what does their roster look like? I think it's good to do videos like these where you just check in on how your team's doing. How are they shaping up? Because yes, it is July 19th. It is not the end of the summer. The season is not about to begin tomorrow. But it's good to evaluate, all right, what has my team done so far, and what do they still need to do? And it's July. What else do you want to talk about? You want to talk about hockey. You got to talk about something. Don't look at me like that. I made a 16-minute video about the Leafs hiring a scout yesterday, and thousands of people watched it. So yeah, making this video makes sense. Thanks for watching. Two things right off the bat. One, there's a lot of mystery with this Leafs roster heading into this season, but it's not so much mystery that we can't figure out what direction it seems to be heading in. And number two, I've been pretty down on this Leafs offseason. They said everything was on the table. I took that to mean, ooh, there's going to be big changes with the core four and everything. And then they proceeded to not do that. But the thing I'm going to say, overall, I'm pretty optimistic about what this team has done. So, what does this roster look like according to me? What's crazy is the Leafs forward group is nearly identical to last year with a couple small exceptions. The big exception is Tyler Bertuzzi is gone. Nick Robertson has asked for a trade, doesn't have a contract, he's still here. Connor Dewar doesn't have a contract, scheduled for salary arbitration, he's still here, and that mostly just affects the left wing, because the right wing, in no particular order, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Calle Jarnkrok, and Ryan Reeves, that is the exact same as last year. Up the middle, Austin Matthews, John Tavares. I put Max Domi at center, and I'll explain why in a bit. And David Kampf. That's the exact same, basically. Left wing is more interesting because I have Matthew Nyes, Bobby McMahon, Pontus Holmberg, who's like a wing center who mostly plays wing at the NHL level, and a bunch of question marks. So how do we arrange that? First of all, I don't know how I would have made this without Puckpedia, so shout out Puckpedia. Arbitrarily, just to start the season. Remember, the playoffs are not beginning game one of the season. We are months and months and months, nearly a year away from that. So what I have is the Leafs' first line, for now, is Austin Matthews in the middle, Matthew Nyes on the left, and Mitch Marner on the right. And that is something that we've seen. Second line, John Tavares in the middle, Bobby McMahon on the left, and William Nylander on the right. That's something we've seen. Third line, I'm not sure we saw this unit very much, but all of these guys played together at least a little bit. In the middle, Max Domi, Pontus Holmberg on the left, Calle Jarnkrok on the right. And on the fourth line, David Kampf in the middle, Ryan Reeves on the right, and a bunch of question marks on the left. They don't have a left winger signed that they can put in that spot. Nick Robertson is not signed and has asked for a trade. Can't put him there. Connor Dewar is not signed and is going to salary arbitration unless he signs. Can't put him there. Alex Steeves is a restricted free agent. You can't put him there. Some other candidates who are signed to contracts, Easton Cowan, but he has another year of junior eligibility left, and do you really want to burn a year of his ELC when you don't have to? Number two is 21-year-old Russian forward Nikita Grabonkin, who was pretty good in the KHL, doesn't always translate, and doesn't always translate right away. There's Fraser Minton. There's a guy who got a cup of coffee, if you will, in the NHL last year. Showed some promise in the preseason, couldn't really hang in the regular season. There's another guy who doesn't have to play in the NHL next year. And, kind of underratedly, he's been a decent player in the minors for a number of years, Leaf draft pick, he's in his mid-20s. Nick Abruzzese could potentially play in that slot as well. Let's say there's a perfect world and Robertson and Dewar sign for $1.5 million each, and I'm using that number on purpose. You'll see why later. I would still probably have Matthew Nyes with Matthews and Marner, or Nylander, it doesn't matter. I think to start the season anyway, I would have Robertson actually with Tavares and Nylander or Marner. Again, doesn't really matter, although I think Marner would probably be a better fit. Third line, I would have McMahon with Domi and Jarnkrok, which is a fun line. You have offensively minded Max Domi with a couple guys who are really good two-way players. One crashes the net and the other is a sniper. And that gives you the option to have a fourth line that is Connor Dewar, David Kampf, Ryan Reeves, or something like Pontus Holmberg, David Kampf, Connor Dewar. Any combination of those 4 guys, and you're probably not scratching Kampf, although you do have the option to because both Holmberg and Dewar can play center. It's just you got to think of the penalty kill. But there are other options, so we'll park that for a minute. Let's look at the defense. Top pair, Morgan Rielly, Chris Tanev. You can move Tanev around. I might move Tanev around, but right now it's Morgan Rielly, Chris Tanev. Why would you move Chris Tanev around? Second pair is Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Jake McCabe. Oh, that's why. Third pair, Simone Benoit, Timothy Liljegren. Oh, okay, that's why. If you heard those pairs and you didn't love them, that's fine. I don't either. Okay, let's try mixing it up. Morgan Rielly with Timothy Liljegren. Yeah, I'm not sure. I love Liljegren being on the top pair, but maybe now that you have OEL and more importantly Chris Tanev, you don't have to play the top pair as much. Then what you could do is have the all old guy second pair of Oliver Ekman-Larsson on the left and Chris Tanev on the right. That's kind of neat. 2 guys who were in the Final Four last year, by the way. So you go Rielly with Liljegren that you already know works. Tanev and OEL, you put the 2 new guys together, which actually might be easiest for team synergy, and then that allows your third pair to be Benoit McCabe, which is a pair that we saw last year, and it worked decently well with McCabe on his offhand on the right. And right now, it's listed on Puckpedia, Connor Timmins would be on the roster. Yeah, we'll get to that. What about Yanni Hakanpää? Yeah, we'll get to that. Now all that's left is the goalies, Joseph Woll, obviously, and Anthony Stolarz. Obviously, Matt Murray doesn't factor into the equation unless someone gets hurt. They're going to try to pass him through waivers, and hopefully it works. He's your 3rd or 4th goalie with Dennis Hill to be also in the minors. So you see that roster, you see the potential holes in it, especially up front. Okay, how do you plug those holes? Well, okay, who can they call up? Nope, that's not the first question. Okay, who can they sign? Nope, not the first question. All right, who do they trade for? Nope. Not the first question. Who can they call up? Who can they sign? Who can they trade for? You don't know the answer to that question at all. You can't begin to answer that question until you figure out how much cap space you got. And the news on that front is actually pretty good. Like, better than it's been, considering this is a team that has had to waive lots of useful players at the beginning of the season and lost them. Like, literally signed guys, they didn't play a single game, they go through waivers and they lose them. Hope the deposit on the apartment wasn't too much. Talking about a team that used a university goalie just because they couldn't afford anyone else, just to fit a rookie college player under the salary cap. You know, one thing I've talked about with the Toronto Maple Leafs cap situation is they're spending too much on 4 guys. Also, hilariously, not so hilariously, the exact same forward group from last year, minus Bertuzzi, minus Robertson, minus Dewar, is more expensive than the forward group from last year. What, Steve? How is that even possible? Austin Matthews is getting a raise, Max Domi is getting a raise, Bobby McMahon is getting a raise, and William Nylander is getting a raise! And they went out, signed Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and they went out and signed Chris Tanev, and they went out and signed Anthony Stolarz. Oh my gosh, how could they afford to pay all this? They must have no cap space. Well, even though guys got raises, Bertuzzi comes off the books, there's 5.5. TJ Brody comes off the books, there's 5. Samsonov comes off the books, there's 3.5. So the cap situation is this. The salary cap for this upcoming season is $88 million. All the players I just mentioned making the team, that's Nyes, Matthews, Marner, McMahon, Tavares, Nylander, Holmberg, Domi, Yarncroke, Kampf, Reeves, yes, there's a forward missing, Rielly, Tanev, Ekman-Larsson, McCabe, Benoit, Liljegren, Timmins, Woll, Stolarz. All of those players add up to $85,544,667 against the salary cap. All right, now I'm going to teach you about the Leafs roster, and I'm going to teach you a little something that I wish I knew before I started shooting this video. So you might notice that the camera's a little askew. That's because I had to reshoot an enormous chunk of this video. That's because I tried to manually input all of the Leafs cap hits into a Word document and figure out what their cap situation was myself. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. I'm not smart enough to do that. You might be. I doubt it. I'm not gonna lie to you. But I definitely am not. You know who is? You know who could just save you so much trouble, even if you are smart? Puckpedia. They have a function called Puck GM. It's a lot like Armchair GM from Cap Friendly, but they don't exist anymore. And you can just figure out the Leafs roster. So here's what I came up with. Connor Timmins goes down to the minors. The Leafs sign Yanni Hakanpää. That leaves you with enough cap space to offer Nick Robertson and Connor Dewar $1 million each. Is that going to be enough to sign both of those players? I don't know. It's not wildly unrealistic. It is a little optimistic. But if the Leafs were able to pull that off, send Connor Timmins down to the minors, sign Yanni Hakanpää to $1.5 million like it was reported on July 1st, sign Nick Robertson to $1 million, and sign Connor Dewar to $1 million, that would give you a 22-man roster. You can have up to 23 that is cap compliant, and you even have $55,333 in cap space. And now that you're not using LTIR like you have been for years and years with Nathan Horton and David Clarkson and Jake Muzzin and Stefan Robida and I don't even know how many other guys over the years. Seems like they always have someone on LTIR to start the season. They're always over the cap to start the season, but it's okay because they're in long-term injury reserve. Instead of that, you get a little bit of cap space. It's not much, but it's a little bit, and you can accrue cap space throughout the season. That means the amount of cap space you have at the trade deadline is going to go up because I spoke to the fine folks at Puckpedia, and basically you take the amount of cap space that your team has at the very beginning of the season and you multiply it by 4.5. That's how much cap space you have at the trade deadline. So for example, if the Leafs were to begin the season with $55,333 of cap space, by the time the trade deadline comes around, that's just shy of $250,000 in cap space. $248,998.50. Now let's say the Leafs sign Yanni Hakanpää. I still assume that's going to be what happens. Brad Treliving talked about it. It's happening. In theory, you could trade Nick Robertson for draft picks, and you could trade Connor Dewar for draft picks. You'd be able to go out and sign a replacement for those guys in free agency at a hair over $2 million if you wanted to. Might be thinking to yourself, ooh, Daniel Sprong? Nah, that's not going to get it done for Daniel Sprong. But maybe someone else. You might look at the Leafs cap situation going forward, some of the contracts they have, how long they go. Don't worry about all that. Cross that bridge when you get there. Right now, the Leafs have options this upcoming season. And there's still the possibility of trades. Maybe a David Kampf trade, maybe a Calle Järnkrok trade. I'm not going to hold my breath on the core. Liljegren is apparently still on the table, potentially. All that to say, it seems very likely that the Leafs, if they're done, mostly done for this draft season, they're going to not only be cap compliant, but have cap space. It's not a bad way to be. Here it is. I created a team called Stove Dingle Butt. It's Matthew Nyes, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Bobby McMahon, John Tavares, William Nylander, Pontus Holmberg, Max Domi, Calle Järnkrok, Nick Robertson at $1 million, David Kampf, Ryan Reeves, Connor Dewar as the extra guy. You can put it in any order you want, whatever. Defense, Morgan Rielly, Chris Tanev, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Jake McCabe, Simone Benoit, Timothy Liljegren. Yanni Hakanpää is signed to a 2-year contract, just like it was reported, and you got Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz. That team has one extra forward, one extra defenseman, a 22-man roster, and still $55,333 in cap space. Thank you! I guess the question is, what do you think of that team? You know my thoughts on the core four. The Leafs said everything was on the table, and I thought that meant changes were coming there, and they haven't come, and I don't think they're going to happen, and that's disappointing, because why did you say those things? That being said, assuming everyone stays healthy, Game 1 of this upcoming season, are the Leafs better than they were Game 1 last season? I think so, yeah. It's important to note that Ilya Samsonov was good. He was very good for the Leafs from January until almost the end of the season. He was. He was terrible in the playoffs, and he was the worst goalie in the National Hockey League from October through December. He was unusable. He was the worst goalie in the NHL. Some goalies were right as bad for a little while. Stuart Skinner, ooh. People forget how bad he began the season last year. Jack Campbell, he was bad, but they sent him down, like, relatively fast. Ilya Samsonov flailed until nearly Christmas, and by the end of it was completely unusable. This year, the Leafs head into the season with Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz. How many extra points do you pick up in the standings just by not having the worst goalie in the league for 3 months? Chris Tanev, whatever his age, however long he's signed for, dude, that's the best right-handed defenseman the Leafs have had during the Matthews era. Who's better? Zaitsev? No. Ceci? No. Barry? No. Hall? No. Luke Shen? I like Luke Shen. But no. Ilya Labushkin? No. Who am I missing? They're not better. Oh, Ron Haynes. Lefty. Oh, Jake McCabe, though. He played the lefty. No. Connor Timmon, no! Oliver Ekman-Larsson is basically slotting into where TJ Brody was. Okay. They do take a hit up front because you're down Tyler Bertuzzi. So that's the minus. There's another guy who started the season pretty poorly. We haven't even gotten to the fact that there's a new head coach, there's new assistants, the power play is going to be different, the penalty kill is going to be different. A lot of things should be at least a little different. Even if you think they've taken a hit up front, and I do, their defense, to me, is better. I don't know if it's great. It's better. Their goaltending, I don't know if it's great. It's better. The Leafs should, money in the bank, get one of their division slots. Be the second team in the division, third team in the division, maybe even compete to win the division. How does that all play out come playoff time? I don't know. I have no idea. But there's reason to believe that this is going to be a fun team to watch for at least the first 82 games. And then we'll see. What do you think of this team and the way it's constructed? The team that I built. Do you think I'm pretty close? Do you think I'm bang on? Or do you think I'm completely off? Do you think something's up? Marner's getting traded to the St. Louis Blues. Who knows? Let me know in the comment box down below if you know. But for now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. July hockey content! We're sick!